Oh yeah, that's a nice photo. I love how bright this section is, and I didn't even really brighten that up. I brightened up all the Milky Way. I do want to see if I can just go one more time. Holy reset. Hello and welcome to another episode of Raw Uncut Editing Process. This is the first photo that I'll be editing today. It was of Mount Jefferson over to the left here, but this ridge right here is just a random ridge that I thought looked cool because it showcases layers. And so let's go ahead and get started by cropping. Use the crop tool. I don't want to get this path right here in it, so I want to just go right above that and maybe a little left. I like the way this ridge falls and the peak. Ideally, I want the peak in the third. And so the way this falls is just has some good artistic lines to it. And then I want to go a little warmer. Expose up a little so I got the whites. But that reveals this little corner here has a path in it. So, all right, that is a good crop, I believe. But I wanted to do another one of these episodes because I feel like I kind of screwed the first one up. I went way long. Like it took a half hour for each photo. So I want to try to edit a little faster today and also not really go over as much. You don't really need to know every single in and out of everything I've edited and a reason why and a description of the photo and all that stuff. So I'm going to try to just speed along the process. But I don't put a video camera on my face because I feel like you don't need it. So this is just my editing process, full length, all of it. And so this photo is the first one today of two. The next photo, I believe, is of the Milky Way and some mountains. But for this, I want a lot of contrast, and so I'm going to try to boost that, but mainly clarity. Because of this was a lot of smoke and haze from a fire, actually. There was a wildfire going on in this area. So when I bring up clarity, you can see all the detail you get from the haze, and it creates like a contrast in the trees. And I don't know if I want to dehaze, just a tad, but mainly clarity and contrast. I like the way, see, look at how it brings you good detail, but I also love, you can see a little bit more detail in these shadows. And there you can see this blue sky because the way this smoke was falling in the valley, it kind of nestled low. And so up here, it turns to blue sky because, well, there was less smoke up there. But I don't want the viewer to see that. So I'm going to drag in a graduated filter and reset all this stuff. And I'm going to make the exposure a little brighter so that it looks consistent. Take the saturation down a little bit just so it stays kind of like a true white. I might even take the temperature warm just to get rid of the blues. And so already I really like this photo because this is actually a lava rock down here. But I do believe I want to bring this up a little bit, but that's a lot. Bring exposure up, but then also I think clarity a tad, and then some contrast. It seems as if the photo isn't level, so I'm going to try to just tilt it a little bit. Oh, that's too much. Maybe I'll just use this. Now that seems a little more straight on. I might not have been level with the horizon, which is hard to do when you have a bunch of mountains. So this is what I'm working with so far. I got some shadows casted by the sun over here. I think that detail that's lost is okay. I want to try to create or try to desaturate this. It looks like some smokiness that was kind of brown. So I'll bring in a filter. And I like the settings, what it already did there. You can see the little before and after. But I want to add a little clarity and then make it a little colder so it gets rid of that brown / orange, whatever was creating that. This was a little bit pre-sunset, which I ended up getting a nice sunset photo that day. But that's not the photo we're editing. Okay. So from here, I think I want to drag in another graduated filter and then reset. And what I'm going to do is make it a little more contrast and clarity towards the upper half of the photo. A little bit of contrast, a little bit of clarity. And you can see what it does. I actually really like that. I'm going to try to add a little haze just by taking down the dehaze, just because I like the mysteriousness it provides in the background there. And we want a good amount of fall off. So I'm going to make that graduated filter large. That way you get some depth. You can see the very clear foreground and then the very faint background. And I like the way that looks, but I think the foreground's a little too clear. So we'll add a little bit of haze to the foreground. And now I think I'm going to tweak the colors a little bit. I'm going to do this. It's split toning. I'm going to add some blues to the those deep greens, or any shadows really. So I'll go to shadows and I'll crank the saturation way up, so don't freak out. But this is just to see what color I'm going to adjust in. And I like that almost blue-green right there. It's got a good mood to it. And so then when I take the saturation down, I can find a good place for it. And I like that right there. So let's go ahead and see a little before and after. There's our before and after. I think so far so good. But I want to see the whites a little wider. Ooh, but that when I adjusted the exposure, it takes it a little too bright. So let's do that. Let's go to like 0.6. And then let's take the shadows down. So that way they stay where they were. But that's going to affect our split toning. Let's go back to that. Just get some subtle blues in there. Might even be too much. And I want to see the crop here. What if we were to leave that path in there? Does that just... That actually kind of adds some dynamic there. But typically in my photos, I don't really like there to be some sort of man-made thing. I'm going to try to go a 4:5 crop and see what that does. Oh, okay. So then let's go a little taller to get the path out. That way I'm closer to the third here this way for the bottom of this hill. There, that's looking good. I love how these treetops are like burnt and broken off. But let me look. I'm recording on my TV simultaneously. That way I can get like a good range of what this looks like on a different screen. So I'm going to look at that real quick. Yeah, it's a little more contrasty on my TV. But I think it's got the same, it's got a good amount of dehaze fall off, but honestly, I think I could just bring this up a little bit. Yeah, that looks nice. Okay, so I think I'm done. So I'll hit, did I really just hit done? Or did I hit cancel? Did I just lose my whole edit? Oh gosh. I hope that saved something. Okay, I got the XMP file. So if I open this, I should just be able to hit open All the edits will be saved. Whoo! I thought I just wasted all that time. Okay, so let's hit open image, not done. Well, now we know what done does. Okay, now this is what we are working with. I think all I'm going to do is bring the saturation down a little bit. Just checking on my TV, and it's a little over green and blue. And then I'm going to use this level tool just to bring in the contrast a little more. Because you can see right here, this side I believe is shadows, like the further you get over here, and this side is highlights. And so obviously there's a ton of whites. I wanted this to be blown out right here, but I want to bring in, like usually if you go left, you know, right here, anywhere where you have like a peak or a ridge, and you want to bring like all this data right here means it's non-existent. So you're taking the whole photo right here and bringing it in a little bit, so that way there's a white point and a black point. You can see right down here there's some black points, and then up here is a white point. So this, when you slide this, makes it to where your photo is a little more dynamic, but I want to find a balance. I think this is maybe a little too much, and so honestly I forgot where it was to start. So let's delete this and do it again. So it did start all the way over there. Wow. So yeah, I want to be somewhere like here. Let me check the TV. That's too much. I'm just going to drag it in a tad then. Probably right there. So I mean, usually I do some curves, but I don't want to be screwing with the shadows. Like if I were to make a move like this, oh, that does add some good tone though to the shadows, or the blacks really. It goes blacks, shadows, mid, and then it goes highlights, whites. My problem with this photo is right in this area, it seems to be a little bit over dark. So I'm gonna go to my camera raw filter again and just try to bring up that one area with a radial filter. And that might have done the trick. I don't like it doing this though. I just really want to bring up the brightness by editing the exposure and then add some shadow, or lift the shadows. And that makes the photo a little more even. I'm going to bring the shadows up a tad more, and then the exposure, let's go to 0.25. And then have the feathers at 100. See, if the feather wasn't at 100, you get this kind of hard edge. I'll remove the overlay so you can see it. You can barely see it, but hopefully you get my point. All right, so feather at 100. And then before, after. That way it's a little more consistent throughout, and then the only really shadow detail over here is low, which I like. So then let's go hit OK. It'll make the changes. Boom, there they are. And I think that's the final edit here, and I want to be done. I like the tones, I like the colors, I like the mood. So let's move on. Well, before that, let's do what it takes to get a before and after. So I'll go open the same image again, and then I'm just going to remove all the edits that I made. Hopefully, I'm going to try to do it quickly. We're going to go as shot. We're going to go default. We're going to go no sharpening added. We're going to go, I didn't edit any of those. Wow. Well, it's because I liked the colors. Oh, I didn't add camera corrections too, or lens corrections. So then this saturation down, we want to take away those settings. I thought I hit default, whatever. I'll hit 0 and 0. That way we're getting the correct crop. So this should be the true, like, before. Actually, the profile should be standard. Ugh. There. That's the true before. So I'll hit open. And then select, copy, paste. But we want to put it in front of the edits. And so that's the before. Let's get rid of these lines. And that's the after. Before, after. That's quite the difference. Okay. So now let's save this. I'll close that. And then let's edit the next photo, which is this one. It's sideways. So I'll go ahead and straighten that out. This is the Three Sisters. Well, you can only see two from this angle, but this is the Milky Way, and that's a nice image of the Milky Way. I like that. But the first thing I can tell is there is some shadow in the corners, which is vignetting. So chances are I was shooting at f1.8, yep, on a 50 millimeter lens for 10 seconds at ISO 500. So let's go ahead and do all of the default tweaking that I normally do. Whoa, that was weird. I usually do that. And then let's go to these and actually put these on. And wow, yeah, that's a little more even. The profile corrections really adjust the brightness in the corners. All right, and so now let's edit the color. I had my ISO at 4000. That's a good little boy. That's a good standard practice. But I think I want to go a tad warmer. And so for my idea here is to lift the shadows and to darken the highlights. The highlights, believe it or not, is actually the night sky. So let's go ahead and take those down. Actually, before I do that, I think I'm going to edit the sky independently. And so I'm going to draw a graduated filter. And so this is the area I'll be editing. And let's go ahead. Exposure down, highlights down, whites down. I might have whites go up, but look at the detail you get out of the Milky Way. It's got these little cloudy bits. It's amazing. But I do want clarity up. And then let's add a little bit of purple hue. I always do that in mine. You might not like it, and I also go a little cooler just because you get that real nighttime feel. I don't want to go too extreme though. So let's drop those back both a little bit. And let's drop the saturation. So that way it is an intense color of whatever it is. But let's draw a radial filter. And I like to highlight the Milky Way in particular and make it stand out. So I'll take the clarity and dehaze. And then take the highlights and whites up. Just for the Milky Way. Maybe a bit of contrast. And I want the Milky Way portion to be a little warmer. And so let's go back to the graduated filter for that top half. And add some exposure. I want to take the highlights and whites up a little bit. Why did I have shadows up? So I want to change the color temperature for the whole photo, see kind of what it'll do. This is actually right here, maybe a little less. This is like a realistic color, right in this range. But I want to keep it a little cool, so I'll slide it down a little bit. Okay. So for the overall image, it's like, how dark do I want the sky? And honestly, I think I do want to bring a little bit of vignetting back. I always like when the top half, or maybe I'll just draw in a graduated filter. See, I like when the top half of the photo gets darker and darker as the sky goes up. Creates some good depth of color. Well, I guess contrast in color, bright to super dark. Because the further you look up in real life, the darker the sky gets. And so I kind of want to mimic that a little bit. I might even draw in another one just to get that to really show. And I want to take the overall exposure, because I don't want it to be that dark. I want to lift it, but also I'm lifting the bottom here. And so since I made those adjustments with the gradial filter, I'm going to counteract them by just doing the top half of the Milky Way and bringing some of that exposure back, because obviously I don't want the Milky Way to fade out. So we want to lift the shadows a little bit. Then I want to draw in another one. I know it's crazy, but with the Milky Way, I really like to make it pop. And it's pretty standard for a lot of photographers these days. This is obviously severe. I don't want to go that much on the exposure. And I'll drop this. I do want to go crazy on the clarity. Okay. So with this original graduated filter that went to the mountains, I didn't take it far enough. You can see, obviously we don't want that glow towards the horizon. But I don't want to bring this too low because then it starts affecting my mountains. Okay, so now I think it's time to edit the mountains. Why couldn't I not edit? Is this the right one? Okay, let's do the mask. Okay, that's the area we're editing. I want to go a little tilted this way. And let's go like that. And then remove the mask. And then let's reset this, lift the shadows. All right. Shadows. Oh, you could actually see there's the foreground. That isn't workable though. We want something that looks decent, but you can tell that information on the photo was lost. Nowadays, like this was taken, I believe, in like 2017. Nowadays, I would have taken a double exposure and then blended them together just by like cutting out the mountains and then putting the stars in a separate shot. And then I could do the foreground shot for like a minute long, and then that information would be there. But if you take a minute long exposure for the stars, they're going to turn into streaks. And so I would have done a 10-second one just the same, but then I would have blended in the mountains and the foreground. But since I didn't do that here, we're going to make the best of it. And so that means not... Oh, wait, I'm editing the wrong one now. Okay, let's go back to this one. And not so much on the shadows. Because really, I'm not focused on this area. I'm focused on these mountains. And it looks like, let's zoom in here. It looks like they are a little discolored. Okay, just making sure I'm editing the right thing. So then we want to take the saturation down. We don't need to have it be oversaturated. And I wonder if there's any whites. Let's just take it up a tad. Take the highlights up a tad. And since they're purple, let's take them to green a tad. That looks a little more color neutral. And I like that you can see a little bit of information down here. And so let's try to restore some of that. Just a tad. Obviously this corner not happening. I wonder what was over there. Maybe the moon was low, but it seems to be extra bright right there. And so let's get rid of the previous settings and then just lift the shadows and blacks a tad. The exposure overall. Yeah, I really wish that could happen. I'm going to take the saturation down even more just to lose the information, or to get rid of that weird purplish hue in the corner. Don't want to take it completely desaturated. Whoa. So there's some information there. Really grainy, really noisy. Okay, that's pretty cool. But now what I want to do is take this whole bottom half and have the color match now. And so I'll reset, and I want to add a color filter and try to get it somewhere that matches that purpley blue that I made the overall image. And then obviously I don't want the saturation to be wild, just barely. That way you get that essence of night. Do I want to go warm? Do I want to go cold? Do I want to go warm or cold? I don't think anything. Okay, so then what I'm trying to do is match this color up here with this, or this color down here with this color up here. And I like that photo. At least good enough to open in Photoshop, I think. I mean, because it seems overall a little bit too dark for me, and I want to lift the shadows like of everything. But I want to do it with curves, and I don't love the camera raw curves that much. And so, I mean, I could try right here. Put that one middle, put this one middle of that one. Whoa, I didn't draw. There. Put this one needs to be a little more middle. There we go. The only thing that looks a little off to me is how the color here at the horizon is a little warm. And so I could draw like this. Obviously reset these colors as a little purpley. And then I could add a little bit of coldness so it would kind of match. But then I don't like really what it does with the mountains. So I'm going to take the saturation down a tad. And obviously these mountains are not in focus because I was focused on the stars, in case you were wondering, but they turned out actually pretty good. So let's oversaturate everything to see what colors we're working with. So what that does is brings this back in. So maybe I ought to draw a little radial filter and make this corner a little darker to hide that blemish. Don't want it to show in the sky there. I think I'm going to duplicate and do the same thing in this corner. That way it looks like that vignetting that I was trying to go for. This corner doesn't need to be as extreme though. And I actually do like the color in the Milky Way when I oversaturate it. So I'm going to take everything down, and then I'm going to go to one of the radial filters that I edited and just take some saturation up. Just so that there's some color depth right there. I think I'm going to add some darkness like right in this area. I don't like how bright the sky is, like overall. Almost doesn't have any dynamic to it. So let's reset and then take exposure and then shadows. Take everything a little bit down, and I want to see what this does. Let's go a little wider. I'm going to check my TV. Man, I don't like how the whole photo overall is dark. And so, dare I take the exposure up on the whole photo? See, but what does that expose down here? This actually doesn't look entirely bad. I might have just found a good middle point for everything. If I were to just choke that back a little that way, and then... Did everything just get brighter? That was a weird... Go about there, go about there. There we go. Okay. Now, something I like to do as of lately is to highlight kind of these bright patches of stars. So that way it looks a little bit more realistic, because right now they all look about the same brightness, or at least in real life it would. And so I just go reset, and then let's make this just small, and then let's turn the brightness up a little bit, but mainly highlights and whites. And you can see it makes that area just glow a little bit, providing some range. And I'm going to duplicate this same thing and then just kind of copy it to every little star, but some of them I'll go a little smaller. And then let's duplicate this one. Put it over here on this one, but then go a little smaller. Just kind of accentuates the sky. This is actually really standard. Holy cow. A lot of photographers are doing this these days, I've noticed. Duplicate. Did it duplicate though? Yeah. Go here. It's like a really tight collection of stars. Duplicate, and same thing with over here. It's just about off frame, so I want to try to keep it away from the edge. This one looks a little bright, but it's like without it, it's already that bright. So I don't think I'm going to take the exposure up on that one as much. So let's back away, see if there's any more. Maybe here, here, and here. So let's go back to that. Duplicate. Go up here. Duplicate. Go up here. Duplicate. Go up over here. See what I mean though? That's good enough to kind of accentuate things. I feel like something in here needs to be highlighted just because you got three, and it's like, well, something in here could be bright. What if we can take one of these and kind of make something bright just so there's balance? We'll go really tight and then really sharp. Oh, that one almost wasn't bright enough. Let's go really bright. And then let's duplicate a normal one and put it over that. Oh, that might be obvious. Let's go tighter feather, tighter star. Let's enhance like they do in the movies. We want a tight point, and now we want the feather back. God, this is going to be impossible to move. And we're making stars. Now let's go up on the exposure. And then let's take this little highlighted area and up on the exposure. Smaller. There. Now it looks like we got a little star in our little nebular area. And this photo's looking good. I'm going to just check my TV. Oh yeah, that's a nice photo. I love how bright this section is. And I didn't even really brighten that up. I brightened up all the Milky Way. But I do want to see if I can just go one more time. Holy reset. So I saved some time on the first one by not editing that one a lot. And now this one, I'm spending extra time. I'm pretty sure I hit that, but whatever. And so now what I want to do is see all these little, here, I'll zoom in. All these little Milky Way cloud little swirls. I want to try to bring those out. I don't entirely know how to do that, but I'm going to try to figure it out right here. I think it's going to be clarity, dehaze, maybe taking some shadows down or highlights up. So let's start with dehaze. A little bit of range there, so let's not get carried away. Clarity. Same. Don't want to get carried away. Probably contrast. And then highlights. What do highlights do? Well, but see, don't want to get too carried away. And then whites. And let's bring shadows down. That's definitely doing something. But I do think the top half of the photo is a little bright by comparison to the bottom half, but I like it. But what I do notice is I think this one right here could be a little longer and further down. Wait. Was it this one? I got to figure out what all I have going on here because it's a lot. Yeah, okay. This one needs to be tighter and then further down. So I could kind of lose some of that glow. Okay, now let's get rid of all these overlays so we can see the final result. I'm going to check my TV for color issues. Man, that looks pretty good. At least good enough to open in Photoshop. I've said that twice now. That's a lot of edits that I just made. Oh, whenever it comes into Photoshop, for some reason, it always just looks a little better. You can see a little bit of the darkness, at least on this screen. I might try to... I'm going to close this and open the raw file again, just because the edits I make, I don't want to make in Photoshop. But when I dropped that graduated filter a little further, it made some of this mountain foreground dark. So I think to get away from that, I'm going to have to take one of these. Wait, what is this editing? Right. So I'm going to make this a little darker. Just to match a little bit better. This is tough because I want to... Oh boy. Here we go. I'm going to paint some of this glow and deal with it that way. Reset, mask. This is the adjustment brush. It's just like the filters, but rather than using a gradient filter or graduated filter and a radial filter, it's a little more customizable. You can paint it on. So I want to hit Alt and change the size. I want it to delete. And so I want to just edit that glow that we're dealing with, which is about those areas affected. Let's make the size a little smaller. So right there is what we're going to make a little darker. So remove the mask, and then let's go exposure. There. Now that glow went away for the most part. Dare I say, good enough to open in Photoshop. All right. So I think this is where I'm going to edit the curves. I like Photoshop's curves just much better. You can see when I click around, it doesn't change everything. It's not super temperamental. I'm just going to lift the blacks a tad because I like that matte black that it kind of adds. But still got some depth up here, which I like. I'm just going to try to lift that a tad. Okay. So that's some good color up here. I like the saturation and depth of the darks, but I think I'm going to tone down the saturation just a tad, like to -10. That looks nice. That looks nice. But I think what I'm going to do, I want to make this, the color of all this, I don't know. It seems like it's not blue enough. Like let's just experiment. I'm going to go to camera raw filter and just change the temperature to a little more blue. Huh. I like it, but it still seems a little saturated, so I'm going to bring down the saturation by like 15. You know, I like that. I really like that. Let's go 17 and then a little bit less blue. Let's go to -5. Okay. I think that's going to finish up this photo. So now let's do a before and after. Just means I have to access this file. Let's put the XMP in my downloads so that when I open this, it doesn't reference anything. So let's turn this over. Let's go to Adobe Standard and then open image. Copy, put it in here, put it above the edits. Okay, so that's the before, after. What do you think? Sorry, I had to look at my TV. What do you think? Before, after. Well, I like that edit very much. Simply said. All right. Well, that does it for today's episode. If you like this kind of thing, go ahead and leave a comment below. Hopefully you do. I hope you learned something today. And that does it for now. I'll see you in the next video. Thank you so much for watching.